All right. Good morning. Okay, there's a good loud sound, and everybody can hear me, I'm sure. So my name is Jeff Kofman, and I guess some of you are interested in the journey from journalism to tech. I wasn't, is the truth. I never thought I would be doing this. And if you had told me 10 years ago that I was going to be running a tech company and dealing with contracts and things like cost of customer acquisition and dealing with hiring people, I would have said, no way, I love being a journalist. I did it for 33 years, starting in Canada. I was with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, but spent most of my career at CBS and ABC News in New York, Miami, 10 years covering Latin America, 3 years going back and forth to Baghdad. Moved to London as ABC News London correspondent in 2010. Won my second Emmy covering the fall of Gaddafi during the Arab Spring. But I started to realize that journalism at American broadcast level, the network level, was changing in a way that I wasn't that interested in, that I was coming back from conflicts and doing stories on posh spice. And with all due respect to posh spice fans in the audience, I'm not interested. And I just found that the kind of jarring switch from sort of the serious to the inane was just making me grumpy, and grumpy people aren't very welcome in newsrooms, as you know. And I just thought, you know what, I'm young enough to do something interesting. I started exploring options and just kind of stumbled into what I would do. You know, most journalists, they write a book, they teach, they do something that builds on their career. I explored both of those. I do teach university. I did explore writing a book. It never happened. While I was researching a university program, I was teaching, I live in London, England, and while I was researching a program for American journalism students in London, I met some developers who'd done something in 2013 with audio and text, and I said, they aligned it, and it followed it like karaoke, and I said, wow, that's really cool. How do you do that? And they said, well, it's actually not that complicated. And I said, well, could you put in this automated speech to text? And I remember this Romanian developer said to me, why would you want to do that? And I said, because the thing I hate most about my job is transcribing my interviews, which are always too long, because I'm always asking too many questions because I'm curious. And it would be amazing if I didn't have to do the first draft of a transcript. I think most of you have experienced or are aware of the black hole of transcription that happens, particularly when you come back, as I did, from these long reporting tours in Latin America with 20 or 30 hours of tapes. And you know, even at ABC, they balked at manual transcription costs. And so my producer and I and maybe a researcher would spend 2 or 3 days in edit suites manually transcribing our interviews. And it was just painful, as I think all of you know. So it was really one of those light bulb moments like you see in the cartoons. It was like, holy cow, we should try this. And so remotely, we tried it for over a year while I was still at ABC. And I sent them some audio and some video, and I said, you know, see what it looks like. And I was amazed. I mean, it was a very crude version of what's now a ubiquitous product. So what Trint does is you've seen, I know we're not the only one. I can explain to you why we're different. But we were the very first to do this, where it takes the audio, it gives you text, and then you follow it along, and you can hear it, and you can verify it and correct it if the AI makes a mistake. That's the fundamental innovation that started Trint. So what I want to share with you today is my journey. You have to understand that I was a reporter for 33 years. I didn't even know what a 360 was. Does anybody here know what a 360 is? A 360 is when all of your colleagues assess you and you assess them. I was on a performance contract all my career. You got assessed by renewal or dismissal. There was no such thing. I have no financial background. I don't know anything about coding, product design, any of that. In fact, I used to, in my early days with this, stand in front of investors in London and say, I am the least qualified person in the room to build a startup, but I have a really good idea, and I know the world can use it. And to be honest, I think that honesty and authenticity was kind of a refreshing change from the bluster they hear from so many aspiring founders who will tell them that they're going to solve the world and they can do it. And I think that authenticity is the first takeaway. Be honest about what you know and be honest about what you don't know. And one of the reasons that makes me feel very good is that it's a rocky road, you know. You may read about, the occasional outlier startup that goes to become a unicorn in 3 years. Most don't have that journey. It's a much more difficult road. I don't feel any need to apologize to my employees, investors, customers about what I am and what I'm not, because I've been very honest about that from the beginning. And what I'm not is a very good finance guy. I'm not good at reading Excel. Words like EBITDA make me slightly nervous because earnings before, somebody help me here, interest. Thank you very much. I think after 8 years I should know that. I kind of do know that, but it's like, I just want to create really great products that transforms people's lives. So one of the things that happens when you do what I'm doing is you meet people and they go, oh gosh, I have an idea for a startup. So what I want to share with you is a couple of tough questions you need to ask yourselves before you actually have a good startup idea. So the first one is, does the world really need your idea? When I began this, I go to these pitching sessions, which were mostly, by the way, a waste of time. You spend a lot of time doing stuff that in retrospect was a waste of time. And there was this, I couldn't understand why so many people were pitching wine pairing apps. You know, I'm having chicken, what wine should I have? I mean, really? I mean, does the world need that? I don't know if any of these apps still exist. I found them on the internet. But I'm sorry if anybody here founded a wine pairing app. I hope you're a billionaire, but I don't think the world needs it. And I think that that's a really difficult place to start a business. I would say games are different. The world may not need games, but that's a kind of a different market that we're not talking about. Question number 2, is it technically possible? I mean, obviously that's a hurdle that you need to jump over. And it's not always abundantly clear. I mean, ambitious ideas require a sophisticated exploration of the opportunity. And if it's not technically possible, could you find people who could find ways to make it? So understanding the existing technologies, by the way, is anybody else doing it, would be a good question to ask related to this. And if so, how are you going to be different? But is there a way to make it possible? And I can give you an example of that in our own product in a moment. So here's the one that I think people don't really understand. There are really good startup ideas that are not good businesses. And I think I was talking to someone just last night about this who had an idea, and I said, yeah, but will people pay for it? And will people pay for it on a recurring level? And will people pay for it on a recurring level that continues to grow? Because like it or not, when you cross the threshold into doing what I'm doing, you're dealing with capitalism, you're dealing with growth, and you're dealing with investors who expect a return. And even if you bootstrap it, which means that you're just using your own money, if you could afford that, you do it sort of the old pizza in the garage kind of thing, you still need to pay yourself and your developers, and you're gonna, as you grow, it's very hard to create a company that doesn't have growth as its model. So you need to understand, are there actually people who will pay for it? And that is a very hard threshold to get across. And my advice to people is be very tough on yourself about this. It's very easy in our enthusiasm for the idea to convince ourselves that the world wants it as much as we do and that the world will pay for it. And by the way, $5 or $10 is not a sustainable business. That's why the bottom end of what I do, transcription, you know some of the products out there that we compete with, they're going to be, many of them, obliterated because free is going to happen. And there's this formula called lifetime LTV to CAC. The things you learn when you do a startup, it's incredible. It's sort of, I kind of laugh and I think, really, LTV to CAC? What's that? Lifetime value of a customer versus cost of acquisition. Marketing is required on a staggering scale to penetrate the very noisy world we live in. and to create a brand that people come to. So it can cost you hundreds of dollars, euros, pounds to bring in a customer, and if they're paying $5 a month, it's going to be really hard, particularly on an individual basis. If you're not dealing with enterprise corporate contracts, it's really hard for that to be a viable business. There are two streams, by the way, that we work in. One is standard enterprise, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, ABC News, Sky News, Der Spiegel are all our customers, Le Monde, France Télévisions. They have 1, 2, 3-year contracts. They pay on a per seat basis, and they don't churn. The best, we're going to talk about product market fit. The best example, the best proof of product market fit is when the contract's up for renewal, do they leave you? And they don't with us, which means we're doing something very right, which is really exciting and validating. The other side of our business is individuals who come and sign up, and they take the free trial, and then the free trial expires and they don't convert, and then they take another free trial under another email, and then they don't convert, and then they come in maybe for a month or two because they've got a project that they really need access to us, and then they leave, and it's a nightmare. It's what's called the leaky bucket. This is the acronym for my area is SaaS. Capital S, small a, capital S, software as a service. So Photoshop, anything that is not a hardware exchange is SaaS. And the leaky bucket of SaaS is one of the things that plagues any business model. They'll pay for it, but they'll game you to death for a free trial as individuals. Do you do something special? In the competitive landscape, what's your differentiator? And that's really critical to understand. You need to be really hard with yourself about these questions, because if you're not different, if I opened another taxi hailing app, I mean, how am I going to penetrate a market that's dominated by Uber, and in the US, Lyft is even struggling in the US and Canada to stay alive? You know, what would make me different? You know, we're going to give everybody a coffee when the taxi arrives. And it's really hard to imagine how you could take on Uber. Somebody may at some point in the next decades, but at this point, it would be hard to create a differentiator to take on something like that. So you need to understand what it is that makes you special and makes the product and the market overlap, so that people say, I want Trint, I don't want the others. And we have those things. And where will the cash come from? You need money. You need to pay people. You may be willing to work for very little. I can assure you the people you hire won't. And you need to pay them, and after a while they're going to want benefits, and they're going to want really nice computers, and they need them because they need to do their work, and it gets expensive. And a small team, it's hard to imagine keeping your team small if you're succeeding. So where does the money come from? This is the venture capital dance with the devil. And you know, everybody talks about who's your VC. VCs are gamblers. VCs are roulette, you know, they're at the slot machine. And here is the equation of a VC. And this is pretty accurate, by the way. They have $100 million. They're going to bet $5 million on 20 companies. So here's the game. They want to return to themselves $100 million. In 5 to 10 years, they want this fund to return to the VC $100 million or so for their efforts, because they spent a lot of time having coffee. And investors who put the $100 million in, which we family offices, pension funds, high net worth individuals, they want 2 to 3x. So they kind of need to get 400, 500 million out of this fund in 5 to 7 years. That is the standard equation of venture capital, right? How does it work? Here's what it looks like. 10 of you will fail, your write-offs. Another 4 or 6 will survive, but you're useless. You're not getting me the money I need. 2 of them will do okay. And these are the 2 that make the fund. And so together, we're hitting close to 500 million, and the fund is a success. The fund managers get their 100, the investors get their 300 or plus, and that is the equation that works. And that is the expectation. You are more likely to be in the red zone than have a star. That is the reality. And this is particularly true with American VCs. In the UK, where you have the British Investment Bank, or British Business Bank, they support a lot of venture capital trust companies. Those companies are actually happier with a smaller multiple. But if you think about it, that 5 million has gone up, what, 80 times, am I right? 40 times in whatever number of years. In Europe, where there's a lot of state money in venture capital, the expectation would be somewhat lower. But the reality is that they're going to ride you till you win the race or die. And some VCs will add value. They can be very smart, very helpful. Some VCs can be really terrible and tyrannical and make your life miserable. You need to do your homework. We have a VC that's helpful. I would say that the thing in Europe that you discover, really anywhere outside, I can't speak for Asia. I'm not able to speak about Shanghai and area. But so in America and the West, the challenge in London with investment and even hiring, and I think this is absolutely true in the continent as well. It's true in Toronto, my hometown, as well. The ecosystem of tech in Silicon Valley really goes back to Hewlett-Packard in the 1950s and really takes off in the 1980s, obviously with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. So that ecosystem is 40 plus years old, about 40 years old. Tech in London really didn't take off until after 2008. I mean, there was a tech scene before, but if you look at the investment dollars and the employment in London, and this is true in Berlin, it's true in Amsterdam, it's true in Barcelona, and it's true in Toronto. The scene is maybe 10 years old, maybe 15. You don't have a lot of experienced investors. The numbers, the venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, the vast majority of people on those boards or on their investment committee have built tech companies. In London, the vast majority are wealthy white men who inherited a lot of money or work in finance and who don't understand the journey. And it's a very profound difference, and you feel it when they're sitting there in their beautiful Savile Row suits telling you how you should bootstrap a company, and you're going, really? So I think that the knowledge base in all of Europe is really much farther, is way behind what it is in the Valley, and that's something to be aware of. I had a choice to move to the Silicon Valley. I just don't like it there. I mean, if you've ever been to Menlo Park in Palo Alto, like, I do not want to live there. And it was, you know, I might be a billionaire if I did, but I have no regrets. It's not a very nice area. It's just sprawling suburbia. The legend of it so far exceeds the reality of it. It's not interesting. And I do think you can do it in Europe. You can absolutely do it. You just need to know who to turn to, because you get so much advice that's good, that's bad, that's confusing. And when you don't know what you're doing, like me, you have to ask a lot of people, and sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's actually really unhelpful. So building Trint from seed to startup to scale up. So the company is now about 90 people. I put the North American sales office in Toronto. It's my hometown. I didn't want to do New York. Salaries are high, rents are high, and I felt like we needed to be in the East Coast because London to California is unbearable for collaboration. The time zones just don't work. And so I looked around, well, why would I go to Boston or Philly or Chicago or Austin when I'm from Toronto? My family's there. I've got good contacts there. And it's a very big tech scene. And it's actually an easier place to operate because Canada has healthcare, so there are certain economic savings, et cetera. So it's really worked out very well as a gateway to America. And it is, frankly, it's our North American sales office, but it really is our US sales office. And I mean, 70% of Trint's revenue is US. So what happens, there's the kind of standard growth of a startup is this. From chaos to some degree of process, to normalcy, to growth, to exiting, hopefully, with a nice payout. I don't dream of the payout. I think it could happen, but I can assure you, somebody once said in a speech, and it resonated, How many of you are in tech to become rich? And some hands went up. And how many of you are in tech because you're excited by the opportunity? Life is, sorry, armchair philosophy 101. Life is about the journey. And the thing about what I've done is, of course I want to succeed, but it's been really challenging and interesting and sometimes hard and sometimes a pain in the ass. But man, has it been a great learning experience for a reporter, I reported from 40 countries. I saw all sorts of conflict. To take myself into a completely different area and have to learn this has just been an incredible journey, and I don't regret it. And I think that the point of that talk that I heard was, if you love what you're doing and you're excited by it, you won't regret the journey. So the problem that Trint solves is that I've lived the journey. I fit a profile of a standard founder. I know the workflow of transcription. My stuff at ABC News had to go to all these platforms at the same time, and I would get a call from ABC Online saying, we need a story, and I'm going, it's 4 o'clock, I'm crashing for deadline for World News, not till I'm done. That was the problem. There are multiple platforms needing the same content. Manual transcription is slow and painful, and so I wanted to use AI to make it searchable. What happened was, because of my contacts, because I had a long career in broadcast, I was able to get into a bunch of big news organizations, Associated Press, Washington Post, in like our second or third year. And that was transformative because people want logos, as it's called, pretty cool business jargon, to follow. And when they see AP in the Washington Post and then the New York Times becoming our lead investor, they know that we've got some credibility. Sure, there are competitors out there. What makes us different? We've built for enterprise. So you can collaborate, you can talk to colleagues with Google Docs, but this has audio and video attached that follows the words. We transcribe in 30 languages, we translate in 50. The product is now localized in French and German, so when you sign on, it speaks French. The help pages speak French and German. We're about to introduce it in Spanish. We have data security. There are 3 buyers when you sell a product: the editorial buyer, the financial buyer, and the technology people in the news. They need to know that they can trust you, that they can integrate you into their systems, and that your back end isn't going to be hacked and all of their data is going to end up on the internet. We also have servers in the EU and the US because in Europe, they don't want data going to the US. We just introduced a product called Mobile Live that allows you to put your phone on and share that live transcription with anybody anywhere in the world as it's happening. So somebody's sitting in London and New York listening to this, hypothetically, on my phone, and they're tweeting out, well, if Twitter's live, what's just been said. So what are the lessons learned? It's really hard. It's so much harder than I thought. The burden of having to deliver to employees, investors, and customers, it's very lonely being a CEO. It's way more creative. We tend to think as reporters that business is just about money. It's really, really creative, and that's fun. And it is generally really fun to be leading people. There are always a few people who are not so much fun. That's life. And I would say, finally, journalists are entrepreneurs. You hustle to sell stories. That helped me hustle to sell my product. Finally, one thing. I just launched a podcast I'm really proud of called Story Tech. It's about how technology and innovation shape the way stories are told. You can find it on all platforms, and it's really, it's done with Syracuse University. It's beautifully produced with great sound design and really interesting guests. Have a listen. That's the journey. I have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Yes, microphone.
Hi there. Hi there. Thank you so much for building Trint. I am a subscriber. Having said that, I did start out as the freebie one with the 3 different email addresses. I'm guilty of that. I did make the business case internally, though, for 2 projects to pay for it. So it has been really helpful and useful. So thank you for that. You've saved me days.
It's really fun to hear this. I mean, it's really cool to know that you actually can do, that it's really satisfying. Thank you.
Yeah. So, no, thank you. You've saved me weeks, years, months, I would say one thing I really love is the fact that you're moving into other languages. And one of the projects I work on is multilingual. We're in 9 languages. The one, I've had great feedback about Spanish, but Arabic, I wonder how you guys are going to improve that. It's so hard with 23 different...
We have a big project underway right now. I think for competitive reasons, I'm not able to divulge until we release it later this year. A transformative multilingual product that's never been built before. And so watch this space. I think my patent lawyers don't want us going any further than that at this point. We've patented, it's a really interesting workflow that has huge potential to answer your question.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
One more question? Anyone? All right, listen, we're pretty much out of time. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was helpful.